who have experienced neglect or abuse as children have reported higher rates of depression, anxiety, drug and alcohol disorders, personality disorders, as well as general distress. So the effects are long lasting and will follow adults into the rest of their lives. Anybody else can go?
I can go. I did something a little bit different. I researched DCF as a whole and how they help children and families that have gone through trauma instead of a specific trauma. So they support them in a variety of ways, whether they do home visits or some people are like in DCF care and things like that. But yeah, it definitely affects both children and adults well into their adulthood. One thing that I found interesting when talking with Deanne is that like people can refuse the help of DCF, which is unfortunate and sad, but it is a fact of life. So it's kind of on them if they want to receive the help or not.
I did research on domestic violence, and when we think of domestic violence, we automatically think of physical violence alone, but it is any behavior to gain control and power over your partner. This can look anything like mental abuse, money control, sexual abuse, isolation, and control. And a little quick fun fact, in Vermont between 1994 and 2017, 50% of all homicides were related to domestic violence.
And I focused on drug and alcohol related traumas. And one of the things that stood out to me was after speaking to a local educator, she mentioned that she was quoted as saying that the prevalence of drug and alcohol related traumas in the community are more than she ever expected, and the numbers are only continuing to rise.
I'm Jordan, but everyone knows that. I focused on the physical abuse and the psychological abuse of children and adults, and the definitions for what each of those are totally two different things. Physical is like harm to someone, and then so the psychological is like when you mentally hurt and weaken or someone mentally and emotionally.
Before we have Deanne speak, I just am going to share my screen real quick. So from all of this research, we decided to make a website, and this website has various resources that we found for each of these types of abuse that someone can experience. There's a couple different kinds of like that you can reach out to. Sometimes people don't feel comfortable reaching out, so there are anonymous hotlines. Sometimes going to somewhere like Planned Parenthood for an appointment, the doctors there are mandated reporters. So if you can't report it yourself, you can talk to a doctor and they can report it for you if for some reason you're in a dangerous situation. I'm just going to share my screen right now. Okay. Can everybody see that? So this is our website. The homepage has a welcome message. There's a facts page, and we use some of the information that we got from our interviews, like the effects of abuse, some signs to look for if you see it in a friend. Maybe your friend's being cut off and you haven't been able to talk to them from a significant other, or it could be a parent, something like that. And you feel the need to report it. It could turn out to be nothing, which would be fine in that case, but it'd probably be better to report it than not to report it. And I know when Deanne talks, she also mentions to always report it, because if a number of them add up, then, someone will step in. So there's also some resources to look for. I'll go to our resource page in a second. And here, and then we also have in this last column, what to do if you notice that someone's being abused, and we have the domestic violence hotline at the bottom of the page. Now for our resources page. So we put DCF on here, and every single one of these links, you can click on them to go right to the website. Vermont Network, which is a nonprofit organization for domestic and sexual violence survivors. Planned Parenthood is a great resource. They do STD testing. They have a lot of resources that they can give you and contacts that they can give you once you go check in with them. And then we have Laraway for families in need of youth services. And they also provide opportunities for struggling youth. And that is our website. So Deanne, I'm going to figure out how to stop sharing my page. Okay, cool. If you would like to speak on some of the things that you told us about.
Absolutely. First of all, I just want to thank all of you again for putting this together and for putting together the webpage. It's wonderful to have all of these resources in one place. So it's so important. I'm really impressed after meeting with you and then after seeing the work that you've done. It looks great. Can you make my screen shareable, and I can just share a few just key points. Also, tell me when to stop. Ask me questions or tell me when to stop. I'm just going to share a few points from the ACEs study that came out.
I think if you attempt to share your screen, it'll ask me to share the permission.
It says host disabled participant screen sharing. It's not a big deal if I can't share it. Yeah, if you go to the green screen share on the bottom and go to the right, there's like an arrow. If you click on that and put share multiple screens. Oh, got it. Thank you. Okay, so I was just going to show just a few key points. Can everybody see this? Okay, so I went to the study for the training when it came to Vermont. I want to say it was, I don't know, maybe like 6 years ago or something, on ACEs, which is Adverse Childhood Experiences. And it really looks at the connection between an ACE, or an adverse childhood experience, which I'll talk about what that is, and really long-lasting health problems. And they looked at specifically, so 2009, they looked at, this is when this was just in Vermont, they looked at over 134,000 people in Vermont, which was enough for them to get a representative sample for their study. And they asked 10 questions on these 10 things, and they wanted to know, how were you affected? Were you affected in these areas? If you checked yes to any of them, you got a point for each one that you checked yes to. So if you experienced domestic violence, with your growing up in a domestic violence household, that would be a 1. If you have a member of your household who suffers from mental illness, that would be a 1. Separated parents would be a 1. Incarcerated household member. So each of these would be a 1. And then they added them up to see what the relationship is between the two. And they found a lot of interesting things. They found that the higher your ACEs score means, which let's say over 2 of those things, you are more likely to be at risk for developing any number of these, whether it be depression, illicit drug use, suicide attempts, unattended pregnancies. Your risk went up. There was a direct positive correlation with the number of ACEs you had to the increased risk that you had for developing any of these illnesses. And they looked at the fact that overall, they looked at it like a pyramid, like Maslow, but they looked at it as it's kind of the bottom tier, is that adverse childhood childhood experiences can add to any number of things, even even just premature death. They said even all of these health issues could even cause a person to die even 20 years prematurely. So they looked at it. They looked at it as a whole. I just have a few. Here it is. If a person's ACE score was over 4, their chances of dying even up to 20 years early went up significantly. So all of the information I'm presenting, this was a 2-day training, so I know I'm trying to cram a little bit in here, but this looks at who had how many ACEs. And the number of people that had 0 ACEs, that didn't have any of those, they grew up in a 2-parent household, no domestic violence, no mental health, no nothing. That was only about 36% of all the people that did the study. And then you can see the numbers as it went up since then. I work at the Lamoille Family Center. I'm a social worker. And so when I went to the training, I came back and I did a training for the staff at the Family Center. And we had people do an anonymous Survey Monkey to see what everybody's ACEs are at the Lamoille Family Center. And you know, it was all anonymous, so nobody knew, but this was pretty representative. There's, I don't know, 25 people, I guess, approximately who work there. And it was pretty representative to what we saw. There were actually very few people that had no ACEs. The average was 2 to 3 ACEs. So it's very rare that a person has none of these. And this just kind of breaks it down into which ones are more common, which is seen. It just kind of puts it in a different perspective. But I want to jump ahead. There's just some interesting fast facts that it shows that the percentage of ACEs actually goes down with the more education that a person accrues. So it's showing that people with a college education, about 1 in 10 people in Vermont have a college education. Those who have a college education actually have a less chance of developing an ACE or developing some type of a chronic illness or some type of a health concern. Obviously, then you're going to see the income, the higher the income, the less ACEs. But one of the really startling things that people realized is that 1 in 4 children in Vermont actually experience 2 or more ACEs. And this is really high. So we went through looking at how, okay, the higher a kid's ACEs are, the more involved they're going to be in school. So we looked at this and said, first of all, the first day of the training was, oh my gosh, we're shocked by all these statistics. And then the second day of the training was, what are we going to do about it? And that's really where, you know, trauma-informed care really comes into play, is what can be done about it. It's one thing to look at it, but what can we do? And it really, I mean, part of it, so after that, a coalition was started where people in Lamoille County got together and were meeting monthly to talk about, you know, what can we do about it? And one thing we can do is really inclusive education, and include everybody. Don't just single out like, oh, that kid's got 2 ACEs, they're going to come out and go to the resource room. It's not like that, but it's actually, let's be inclusive and let's include everybody in these wraparound services. Let's just not single people out. So that was one of the big things that came out of it. Am I talking too long, Kayla?
So I just want to leave a little bit of time.
Oh yeah, go ahead.
Everyone. Yeah, this is all really great. Does anybody have any questions about any of this information so far? Or anything to add?
Well, I have a question. The statistic of, what was it, 1 in 4 children in Vermont, does that mean 3 out of 4 have 0 ACEs?
That's a really good question. With the statistics, is all that means is that you're right. That means 1 to 3 kids, or 3 out of every 4 have fewer than 2 ACEs. So it doesn't mean they have 0, but it does mean. And some, unfortunately, once you get like 2 ACEs, there's a chance that if there's drug and alcohol abuse, if there's domestic violence, is a good chance there could also be incarceration, or there could also be some other things. But yeah, that was a good question. Doesn't necessarily mean 0, but it could mean 1 or could mean 2.
I'll ask a question.
Yeah.
Hi, Dan. I'm David McGough. I'm an instructor at the college also.
Hi. Yes, we've passed each other in the hall before,
Well,
long
back
ago.
when- and with your information, or any of the information that you all have researched, did you hear about or learn about, I'm going to call it disaggregation, like the effects per gender, or the effects per race, or the effects per class? Did you get any insight about those kinds of population-specific effects or experiences? Or does that show up in the ACEs measure?
I'm not sure about everybody else's research, but from what I've seen from like our whole of a research, class plays a huge role, and it tends to be that race diversity is a lot less in certain areas, so it definitely is kind of like intertwined. But the more money someone has definitely plays a role in the resources that are available to them. Planned Parenthood is a great example of a resource that's available to everyone, but some people don't know how to get to that resource, or they don't have the means to get to a resource. So I definitely think that from everything I've looked at, there's just like, it's getting better. Like, we're getting better about making free resources and more accessible resources for those who don't have the means or the money to get to like a doctor's appointment, for example.
I know with domestic violence, it was more likely to be a woman that was being controlled because of the intimidation of a man and the size difference. That was one big thing.
That was the same for physical abuse, and mine, like women and children were a lot higher. I mean, it was like 3 and 4 for women, or like 2 and 4, and then it was like 1 and 4 for men.
I'll follow that up. Dan, can you just talk about divorce as an ACE? It seems like our approach to divorce and our acceptance of it has changed over the decades, and I'm just wondering where that stands now as an indicator of an adverse experience.
Yeah, and the interesting thing about the questionnaire is it talked about, were you affected by it? So the question, I should have had a slide that showed the actual questions, because it talked about being raised by one parent, or being, it was something like divorce, separation, or it even said death, because I know a coworker of mine, and I hadn't really thought about it before, but a coworker of mine, her mom died when she was a teenager. She had a long-term illness, and she counted that as an ACE. So it's interesting the way they look at it, and it's how you perceive it, that somebody could have gone through something in their childhood, but they might not have perceived it as really directly impacting them. So it's really interesting how not everybody might see it. I mean, you might have some kids who would look at it as, oh, it's not something that negatively impacted me, or it's not something, but for a lot of people, it was like it was a direct impact. I think there's more resources now than what there was, like what you're saying. I think it's tough because in single parent homes, I think there are more kids who are parentified now at a really young age, 10 or 11, and they're taking care of their younger siblings. Well, maybe that was always the case, but it's definitely something that's looked at more closely than it was.
Another thing is something that's I've seen a lot of is co-parenting households where they're not together, but they still co-parent very well. So households that have that might not have the same adverse effects as separation households that didn't get along.
And the great thing, I just wanted to add the great thing about some of the service. I work for Children's Integrated Services, and I provide family support. And the great thing is I can work with any family that has a child under the age of 6. There's no income. So it really takes away the stigma. So it's not like, oh, you only work with low income. And it's like, no, I go out to some houses and they live in beautiful houses. I'm like, oh my gosh, you're such a nice house. But it's just, and it takes away a little bit of that stigma of, oh yeah, you know, it's low income, or, you know, and any other kind of, or, oh, you have to, you know, have me come out. But it brings it out to, no, it's open to everyone. And the more resources I think we have like that, I think it definitely, it's baby steps, small things, but it can help.
So is that because there's a funding mechanism or particular policy which permits you to do that for no cost?
Yes. So right now we're under, it's some kind of a blanket funding for Children's Integrated Services. I mean, it might change. They were trying to pass a bill to have us do fee for service, which we used to do. And I felt like a telemarketer, you know, be calling people up, hey, can I come out? So that was, you know, so for right now, it's a blanket fund. And what happens is the people that we can, like, yeah, definitely Medicaid, we can bill. So it kind of takes over for the people that we can't bill for. If there's somebody that has private insurance that we can't bill for, you know, oh, that's okay because because of this blanket funding. So for right now, you know, fingers crossed, for the last couple of years, it's been that way. Thank goodness.
And unfortunately, we live in a very capitalistic society, which time is money, and money is everything. But I feel like we're growing to kind of break some stigmas about people working pro bono and just doing what they enjoy, even if it means you're losing that money in the process, because it helps the economy in the long run if you're helping people build that infrastructure. We're almost out of time. I want to encourage everybody to save the website link and share that with anybody you might know who could get it out there. I think I might share it on my Facebook page just to get it out there more.
Yeah, can you email it to me just in case I'm not able to save it properly? That would be great, because I can share it with my colleagues at the Family Center too. And it's very interesting. You have a lot of great resources on there.
And I'm gonna, I recorded this and I'm gonna post that on YouTube. So I'll also send you that link if you're interested. Yeah, are there any last minute questions? Well, thank you everybody for coming.
Thank you for doing this.
Yeah.
This is great.
Yeah, thanks. It's great.
All right.